about 15 to about the age of 18, I struggled with some really, really difficult issues, which is part of which led me to getting pregnant in the first place, was sort of that desperate need for approval and not really knowing, suddenly going from not being a sexual person to being seen as very sexual almost overnight with really no mental or emotional capability to deal with that.
Rhiannon Good was 17 when she got pregnant. She had a steady boyfriend, but when she gave him the news, he left her. Half of all pregnancies in America are unintended, and nearly half of those will end in abortion. That's according to the Guttmacher Institute. It's a research organization affiliated with Planned Parenthood. When Rhiannon Good learned she was pregnant, she decided to have an abortion.
I felt relieved. I was very, very relieved.
Research shows most women feel relief following an abortion. One UC Santa Barbara study followed post-abortive women for 2 years. 72% of women reported more benefit than harm from the abortion. Only 1% had signs of post-traumatic stress disorder. But despite the science, the idea of post-abortion syndrome is gaining credibility these days, and it's coming from the highest court in the land. In April, the Supreme Court upheld a 2003 ban of a specific late-term abortion procedure, dubbed partial birth abortion. It's a procedure rarely used, accounting for less than 1% of all abortions. But in the court's decision, Justice Anthony Kennedy wrote, "Some women feel regret following abortion and can suffer from depression and a loss of self-esteem." Some studies say that may be true for some women, but they are in the small minority.
Well, it was really shocking to see that anti-choice rhetoric could find its way into a court decision when he also recognized that there was no scientific medical evidence to support it.
Amy Everett is the state director of NARAL Pro-Choice California, an advocacy group for women's reproductive rights. She says the Supreme Court quoted a brief submitted by a fringe group called Operation Outcry, a group that claims women turn to drugs, alcohol, and are often depressed after having abortions.
You know, they're out there and they're like this incredibly vocal minority, and they do things to grab headlines, and they do things to put the most horrible framework around women's private decision making out there. And the really important thing, especially for the pro-choice movement, is not to have our agenda set by these fringe people who actually don't represent the majority of Americans in any state in the country, but to actually, for the pro-choice movement, to actually focus on what we do best and what we wish that these groups would work with us on, which is to reduce unintended pregnancy, so we could all work together to reduce the need for abortion.
In Beverly Hills, at Ms. Magazine headquarters, the magazine founded by feminist Gloria Steinem, there is a campaign on to take abortion out of the closet, a campaign that has thousands of women declaring they had abortions without regret, shame, or guilt.
We felt that we had to wake up the country and put the woman back into the picture. It's women's lives and their health that is at stake in this debate.
And so last year, the magazine asked women who had abortions to come forward and publish their names in the magazine. Thousands did. So many names there wasn't enough room in this issue to publish them all.
Yes, some women will. Some women regret continuing a pregnancy. Some women regret getting married or entering into a relationship. But to take away a safe medical procedure that saves more women's lives, and their mental health and their ability to continue living on these so-called studies, which have been disproved time and time again, is so irresponsible. That's why this Supreme Court decision in many ways was irresponsible. It took as dogma anti-abortion literature and conclusions and incorporated those into a Supreme Court decision that governs all of us.
The harshest criticism of the court's decision comes from the court itself. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. In her dissenting opinion, she wrote the court's own words revealed its bias. Revealing this regard, the court reveals an anti-abortion shibboleth for which it has no reliable evidence.
This decision, I believe, puts this question of abortion and the right to legal abortion right into the center of the 2008 presidential and congressional races. You know, a lot of politicians don't want to have to answer these questions.
My question is a simple one. In your opinion, what is the most pressing moral issue facing this country today? And if you're elected president, how would you address that issue?
It is our respect, our sanctity, and our understanding of the value of every single human life.
With the Supreme Court revealing a majority willing to make changes to abortion laws in this country, abortion rights groups fear Roe v. Wade, the 1973 ruling that prevented states from making abortion illegal, may be vulnerable. It's what anti-abortion activists have been waiting for. Both groups are paying close attention to where the next president and Congress stand on the issue. The partial birth abortion ban may just be the call to arms for both sides.
The fact that these people are gaining credibility, saying that, you know, abortion is morally wrong and women regret it and it's going to ruin your life, I think the fact that that's gaining credibility makes me feel almost obligated to share my story and say, no, there's people out there that are doing just fine. She says, there's nothing good in there.
Rhiannon Good is 29 now. She's married, a college graduate, a writer, and a campaign manager for Planned Parenthood, a group she says gave her support when she needed it most.
I went through a lot of therapy, you know, to deal with my other issues, and the interesting thing was, now that I hear a lot about women and their regrets about abortion and how it made them depressed and ruined their life, and I'm thinking, you know, I was very depressed and very anxiety-ridden before my unintended pregnancy and before my abortion, and I did go to therapy, and I was depressed afterwards. But the one thing that I never had to deal with in therapy was the fact that I had an abortion. It's plum pudding, it's totally different.
Good and her husband are now expecting their first baby. Good says she's moving forward in her life with no regrets. She feels sorry for the women who can't move on.
I empathize with the fact that they have this regret and they feel like they made a bad decision. But I guess if I had to talk to one of them, I would really want to maybe probe into that. And do they regret having the decision? Do they regret being able to have that decision? Or do they regret the decision that they made? Because that's a totally different thing. And I think if some of them really thought about it, I think it might come down to, no, I regret the decision, but maybe it was a good thing that I was able to have that decision.